He said to them, "Why are you sleeping? Get up and pray so that you won't give in to temptation." Hey, I'm glad you've joined me on my devotions today. While Jesus was still speaking, a crowd appeared, and the one called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him. Jesus said to him, "Judas, would you betray the human one with a kiss?" When those around him recognized what was about to happen, they said, "Lord, should we fight with our swords?" One of them struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. Jesus responded, "Stop! No more of this." He touched the slave's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard, and the elders who had come to get him, "Have you come with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a thief? Day after day I was with you in the temple, but you didn't arrest me. But this is your time when darkness rules." Well, stories don't get much better than these in the Word of God, especially as we approached Jesus' final week on earth, at least before his passion and death. Let's back up just a hair as we tell the story of the garden, but let's go before that. And Jesus, in this text that I'm about to read, has already had the triumphal entry. That's past as it was Monday. This is earlier in the week. He's been teaching. Well, let's pick it up. Here it goes. It's from the book of Luke. I like Luke. John's my favorite because he tells the human inside the story, but so does Luke. Luke is about social justice. He's writing from outside of Judaism. His perspective is that of a Greek and a Roman, and so he gives us insight no one else does. He says in the 21st chapter, verse 29, Jesus told them a parable. "Look at the fig tree, all the trees. When they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see these things happening, you know that God's kingdom is near. I assure you that this generation won't pass away until everything has happened." Remember that. "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will certainly not pass away. Take care that your hearts aren't dulled by drinking parties, drunkenness, and the anxieties of day-to-day life. Don't let that day fall upon you unexpectedly like a trap. It will come upon everyone who lives on the face of the whole earth. Stay alert at all times, praying that you are strong enough to escape everything that is about to happen and to stand before the human one." Now, every day, Jesus was teaching in the temple, but he spent each night on the Mount of Olives. All the people rose early in the morning to hear him in the temple area. Well, that sounds pretty apocalyptic to me, does it not to you? And I don't know how many stories I've heard from extremely well-meaning Christians who have misinterpreted this whole COVID-19 thing. Now, let me be clear. Jesus is returning, and he is returning in part to begin the restoration of all things, to end forever injustice. He will bring the church with him, and we will see him, and like the old Romans who would be going out outside the city when the emperor would come and visit. It will be a big event. Everyone on earth will see it, and we will go out to greet him and see him, because when he comes back, and the church who has passed, the saints who have gone before with him, the purpose will be the full restoration of the planet. One of the joys I'm having right now is I'm getting to rebuild our church, to oversee it, and right now my hands are on electrical work, and I can do it. I'm all alone. I'm obeying all the COVID rules. It's essentially my home next door. It's God's home, not mine, but so I get to do it for free, and it's fun, and electrical work has always been a pleasure, and it is. But imagine the skill sets God has built into me and into you that will one day come back and be used in the restoration of the planet as it should be even now. Jesus is saying something very important. Don't let my purposes, don't let what I'm about to do, don't be dulled by not being in your right spirit and mind. Don't be dulled by anxiety that you miss the whole point of living. For the day is going to come like a trap, meaning the day of my coming. But he's really talking about, in the context here, is as the things that are going to happen that surround it that are quite difficult. The reason people misinterpret that is that they constantly put on Jesus, on the Father, all the bad things that are happening as though it was some kind of judgment against the earth. And I understand the language of that. The apocalyptic literature of particularly the New Testament in John almost infers that at a brooch reading kind of thing. But when you look inside it, what you really see is the evil comes from our wounds, the environmental destruction from our greed, all of the sicknesses that come from and our inability to respond to them meaningfully come from the way that we have organized ourselves, structured ourselves, so that, for example, with the COVID-19, we have some racial groups that are impacted more than others. Why is that? It's because there has been a systemic history behind that of disadvantage. Those are the things that bring evil into the earth. Sadly, it's you and me. God shows up to save us. And we want to be inside that story, or we miss the whole point. We miss the whole thing, the purpose of our creation. And that's the message Jesus gave when he came. It's the message we need to be giving today in the midst of these trials, these temptations, because they bring very real opportunity to be about the kingdom, about the restoration of all things on the planet, the shalom of God that was originally intended. Well, I'm going sideways here, so let's pick up the story, because what's happening here in this entire week from the beginning till right now is that Jesus has been coming to his holy temple. And that fulfills a prophecy from the book of Ezekiel, particularly. God was really kicked out of his temple, according to the text, because of the sin of the priests and because they were allowing idols to come into the holy place. And so God just, if you'll go with me, we're going to kind of go on a little bit walk here. So in any event, God was literally kicked out of his own temple, and he comes back in Jesus of Nazareth, and he walks through the eastern gate as was promised from the Mount of Olives, where was the last thing that the Spirit of God touched the earth in the vision of Ezekiel. And he comes into his holy place, and there the people are enthralled with his teaching and the works and healing graces that he is doing. I'm reminded that when Catherine Graham was asked about 9/11 and if that was the judgment of God, she rather wisely said, well, I'll tell you where God was. He was with the first responders, those who were sacrificing their life in order to save their fellow human beings. That's where God was. That's where he showed up. And that's where the church will show up in these days. I'm coming out now just so that I can kind of finish this, and I'm going to switch it around here a little bit if I can figure out how to do this. I'm not sure that I'm smart enough. And so if I can't figure it out, we won't do it. I'll just show you. This is the new park that God has enabled us to begin to create. And I come out here to have devotion sometimes because it reminds me of the space and what God can do over time when he's granted room and we obey. In any event, so they came to the Garden of Gethsemane, and as usual, it's where Jesus would go with his disciples. It was the pattern. On that night, they went there just as they had every night. Now, Jesus has pretty well told them he's going away. And, hey, how you doing? It's going well, thank you. Blessings. And he's told them that he's going away. And it will be tragic for them. And that great pain is about to fall upon the earth. And he's scaring them like crazy, and for good reason. He's even telling that in the past he has sent them out and told them that they they should, rely totally upon God and not even take their extra tunic with them, not take any money bags or anything like that. But now he's saying, take your money bags, sell your cloaks, get your swords. And a couple of the disciples said, Lord, we have two. Is that enough? Luke just kind of almost as a reference to make sure that they didn't misunderstand that he was really talking about, the Second Amendment or anything. It says, Jesus simply, almost in humor, says, and yeah, that's enough. Don't worry about it. And so Jesus comes to this night. He's washed their feet. It's interesting that in Luke's gospel, Judas is at the table in Holy Communion. That's not appropriate according to the church, but there's a lot of things that the church says isn't appropriate that Jesus somehow finds a way of making appropriate. Anyway, Judas is there, and he gently says, Judas, go do what you need to do. He doesn't even embarrass him that night, according to one of the other texts. Just get it done. And the people and the other 11 thought that he was going out to take care of the poor, because he had the money purse, etc. And so then after those events of that week, hey, how you doing? It's nice to be out, isn't it? Yeah, for sure. Anyway, so after the events of that week, then what happens is the disciples in the dark of the night go by the holy temple. They see a vine on the wall outside the temple, and Jesus begins to tell them the story that he says, my Father's the gardener, you're the branches, I am the vine. Stay in me. Then he calls them friends, which is unreal that God would do that, which is cool, which is why I'm a Christian. And he talks to them about the Spirit of truth that is going to come, and that the truth, their giver, will comfort them and keep them. And then he prepares them again for the storm that's about to take over. They were feeling much like we are feeling in these days. How big is the curve going to be? It was going to be horrible. And it was. But he keeps telling them they'll get to the other side, just as we will. And no, this is not the final event. A lot of life is yet to be lived, so it's going to go on. So don't be too scared. Just be awake. Just be aware. Look for the opportunities you have. And then the text comes back to the story. He goes to the garden, and he goes, and the disciples are, I'm going to show you, are gathered around one tree, and he goes what's called a stone's throw to another tree, and in that place, Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he is praying, and he says, stay awake with me, the three of them. Have a good one. Thank you. And so to three of them, he says, stay awake with me. And they, of course, don't. They sleep. And he comes and he wakes them up. And that's the point at which he says, well, it's too late. Judas has come. And that's where we get our hope from. Because you see, we tend to fall asleep and get dulled by life. We tend to drink too much wine. We tend to stay up too late. We tend to let our anxieties absolutely own us. It's what we human beings do. Those are the real enemies. You see, we should not be surprised that difficult moments come. We live in a culture that says difficult moments are evil in and of themselves, and there's some merit in that, but it's unrealistic in many ways. We're not as in control as we think we are in America. We need to wake up to the reality of that. Love is only increased in its capacity and its joy if difficult moments come, if we are awake in them. So one of the real lessons here is get your sleep. Don't stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning like I did last night on Facebook. Get some patterns. Go to the garden of prayer, of silence, of peace. Stay there. Use this time. The economy is going to kick back. It may take a while, but we'll be fine. And you're going to be so busy you won't know what to do when it comes. There'll be things that we got to do, places we got to go, people we got to see. That's, by the way, one of the phrases that characterizes the church in Romans chapter 8 in the message. In any event, you're going to be too busy. Use the moment. Don't waste it. Terry, I'm speaking to me. Don't let your addictions hone you. Don't be dulled by anxiety. Look around and see who needs to be loved. That's why we're here. Jesus put it this way: Father, I don't want this cup. If there's any way, let me out of it. Nevertheless, life's not about my will. It's about your glory, your goodness. I want to be one of the first responders. Thank you, nurses and doctors, those who clean our hospitals, those who are vulnerable in this moment. I want to be the first responder. I'll identify, and in me, the Father and Spirit changed. They drunk deeply of the death inside our wounds. They became us at our worst, so they can recreate us into the best we are called to be as individuals and as community. May God bless you.